On this Wednesday night, political theatre or genuine offer to help? Signs the federal Conservatives may want to cooperate with the Liberals.
I have yet to see the Conservative being very constructive.
Alberta versus Ottawa again, why the Premier is demanding changing how federal judges are appointed or else. Bill Gates breaks his silence.
Every minute I spent with him, I regret and I apologize.
What the billionaire is saying about his relationship to Jeffrey Epstein. Plus, bringing her A game.
There is no perfect dog, but she's very close to the written standard.
The first Canadian canine to win the Westminster Dog Show in 11 years. And what's next for her?
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. After months of criticizing Prime Minister Mark Carney's approach to trade negotiations with the U.S., the federal Conservative Party appears to be taking a different tact. A Conservative MP who says he's friends with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has gone to Washington, saying he wants to help the Prime Minister, though it's not clear who he is meeting with. In Ottawa, the Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre met with Mark Carney today. The Liberals have said the official opposition has been deliberately slowing down the passing of legislation. So is this political posturing or a sincere effort to work together for Canadians? David Akin has our top story tonight.
I want to help Prime Minister Mark Carney be successful.
That's Conservative MP Jamil Jovani in a social media post explaining why he was on his way to Washington, D.C. Jovani is a friend of U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. The two met while at Yale University in Connecticut. Jovani did not say he was meeting Vance in Washington, and in fact, Jovani did not respond to a Global News request for his itinerary. But Jovani did say he believed he could help improve Canada-U.S. relations.
This is not a partisan issue.
Liberals, though, did not think much of Jovani's Washington visit. Prime Minister Mark Carney dismissing it as a public relations stunt.
I think it might have something to do with all of you.
But the Conservatives see it as their way of trying to help, something Pierre Poilievre told Carney when the two men met Wednesday.
We have been working to fast-track anything that we believe, however modest, might make life a little more affordable, a little safer, and our economy a little stronger.
Carney did not speak to reporters about the meeting, but other Liberals said it was the Conservatives who are blocking the government's agenda.
I have yet to see the Conservative being very constructive, despite what they say publicly.
We've been asking for help on cracking down on fentanyl, Mr. Speaker, and tackling organized crime, but they've been stalling and they've been obstructing all along.
And there's a bit of truth on both sides here, Donna. Yes, the Conservatives have tried to block some legislation, but on Monday, it was the Conservatives who proposed fast-tracking the Liberal plan to boost GST benefits. So you take that, today's meeting with Carney, the Jovani trip, all of them signs that Poilievre and his party think one path to reversing sliding poll numbers for the Conservatives is to be seen as helping to move things forward, rather than being seen as standing in the way.
Okay, David Akin in Ottawa, thank you. Alberta's Premier wants more say in appointing judges, including to the Supreme Court of Canada, and Danielle Smith has threatened to hold back funding the judges need to do their jobs unless she gets it. Judicial independence is a core principle of Canadian democracy, and the federal Justice Minister responded today saying he intends to maintain the process that he says is rigorous and independent. Heather Yourex-West explains what Premier Smith wants and why.
Another battle line between the Alberta and federal government has been drawn, this time over how federal judges in the province are appointed.
My sense is we have a functioning independent process. We should protect it and defend the independence of the judiciary at all costs.
Justice Minister Fraser says there is no need for change after a call from Alberta's Premier for reform. In a letter to the Prime Minister dated January 23rd, Danielle Smith said she expected input when it comes to upcoming judicial appointments, adding Alberta's government will not agree to provide funding to support any new judges until such engagement and collaboration are provided. Under current practices, a federal judicial advisory committee from each province is already involved in the appointment of federal judges, which includes nominees made by Alberta's Justice Minister and the Law Society of Alberta.
It is not in the least chosen by the Liberal caucus in the way that people might imagine.
Smith's letter comes after the Premier prompted a rare public statement from Alberta's Chief Justices with a comment on her Chorus radio call-in show in response to a question about bail reform.
I wish I could direct the judges, honestly, Chris. The judges get very, very prickly when you criticize them. But boy, the example that you just raised, they deserve the criticism.
In a statement online 3 days later, Alberta's chief justices emphasized the need for judicial independence. A properly functioning democracy requires 3 separate branches of government, they wrote. Independence of the judicial branch protects the public. Lawyers in the province have also expressed concern.
The rule of law is being dismantled in Alberta, and this is another part of that. I think is happening right now is that this province is asking to interfere further, or at least have appointed the judges they want. And because they can't directly tell the judges what they want them to do, they're trying to now dictate which judges actually get appointed.
Alberta currently has 3 vacancies of the 79 total judicial positions on the Federal Court of King's Bench. Heather, Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
There's some breaking news from Italy. 3-time Canadian Olympic medalist snowboarder Mark McMorris suffered what's being described as a heavy crash during a training run and had to be removed from the course on a stretcher. Redmond Shannon is covering the Olympics in Italy for us and joins us with what we know so far. Redmond.
Donna, before the Games have even begun officially, some bad news for Team Canada and potentially very bad news for 3-time snowboarding bronze medalist Mark McMorris. He had what the Canadian Olympic Committee is describing as a heavy crash in practice for the big air event in Livigno in the Alps on Wednesday evening. Now, we don't know much more about his condition, but we have seen those photographs of him being tended to on a stretcher on the slopes in Livigno. The 32-year-old, who is hoping to compete in his 4th Olympic Games, is no stranger to serious injury. However, the qualification begins tomorrow, a day before the Olympic opening ceremony on Friday, with the final, if he would make the final, on Saturday. And indeed, in his other event, the slopestyle snowboarding, well, that begins on Saturday too. So it really is a race against the clock for Mark McMorris. Donna?
Okay, Redmond Shannon in Milan, thanks. The Trump administration says it's going to reduce the number of federal immigration enforcement officers in Minnesota. White House border czar Tom Homan says about 700 of the 3,000 federal agents there will be withdrawn immediately because of what he calls unprecedented local cooperation.
We have made significant progress under the direction of President Trump, working with state and local officials here in Minnesota, and I expect that to increase in the coming weeks.
Homan also says remaining agents in Minneapolis and eventually nationwide will wear body cameras, but he says there is no timeline for the full ICE surge to end in the city. Residents there continue to protest the mass arrests of immigrants and the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. There are increasing signs President Donald Trump may try to take control of November's midterm elections. President Trump has floated the idea of nationalizing some state elections, even though the U.S. Constitution makes it clear that states run elections. As Jackson Prosco reports, it all ties back to Trump's obsession with unfounded claims he's made about voter fraud in past elections.
If a state can't run an election, I think the people behind me should do something about it.
The rhetoric has only grown more worrying as President Donald Trump suggests taking federal control of November's midterm elections.
Look at some of the places that horrible corruption on elections, and the federal government should not allow that. The federal government should get involved.
Some of Trump's top supporters want to go even further and deploy federal immigration agents on Election Day.
We're going to have ICE surround the polls come November. We're not going to sit here and allow you to steal the country again.
The notional idea that he will, ask his loyalists to do something inappropriate beyond the Constitution scares the heck out of him.
Concern has only grown since last week's FBI raid at a Georgia elections office, where federal agents seized ballots and records tied to the 2020 election. The process was personally overseen by Trump's Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
The only thing that they're going to find in those ballots is that President Donald Trump lost the 2020 presidential election.
Trump remains obsessed with his 2020 loss to Joe Biden and continues to spread false claims while threatening revenge in increasingly ominous terms.
It was a rigged election. Everybody now knows that. They found out. People will soon be prosecuted for what they did.
The only thing standing in Trump's way may be his own party.
Everybody understands that the states are in charge of administering the elections.
But as Trump learned 6 years ago, talk alone is enough to sow doubt, calling into question the credibility of the vote and its result. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
The Washington Post newspaper is laying off more than 300 journalists in what's being described as one of the darkest days in the history of that organization. More than 1/3 of the paper's staff are being laid off, including the entire sports department and the Middle East bureau. The paper calls them difficult but decisive actions. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos bought the paper in 2013 and has faced mounting criticism in recent years over his relationship with President Donald Trump. Among those being let go are sports reporters who are already on site covering the Super Bowl and the Winter Olympics, and war correspondents, including Lizzie Johnson, who is in Ukraine and posted she was just laid off in the middle of a war zone. "I have no words," she says. "I am devastated." Police in Arizona say they have yet to identify a suspect or person of interest in the disappearance of the mother of American TV host Savannah Guthrie. Nancy Guthrie was reported missing on Sunday. It's believed she was taken from her home in Tucson. The sheriff's department says they've received hundreds of leads and have no credible information that Guthrie's disappearance was a targeted incident. It cautions the public about sharing unverified accusations and false information. A tech billionaire's apologies and admissions. Coming up, what Bill Gates is saying about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. The founder of Microsoft and one of the world's richest men now says he regrets ever having known Jeffrey Epstein. Bill Gates appears in the release of Epstein files and had a relationship with the convicted sex offender, but Gates denies he engaged in any inappropriate behavior. His ex-wife has also broken her silence, and she says there are questions Gates and others must answer. Touria Izri reports.
It's a connection billionaire Bill Gates is being forced to explain.
Every minute I spent with him, I regret and I apologize that I did that. Although the time was a mistake, it had nothing to do with that kind of behavior.
The Microsoft co-founder knew Jeffrey Epstein for years, but their ties are under renewed scrutiny after the U.S. Department of Justice released a trove of documents last week. In an interview with Australia's 9 News, Gates denies allegations of inappropriate behavior. Epstein sent emails to himself in July 2013 containing unverified claims of helping Bill to get drugs to deal with the consequences of sex with Russian girls, while also facilitating trysts with married women, and that Gates requested antibiotics from Epstein to surreptitiously give to Melinda, his now ex-wife.
Apparently, Jeffrey wrote an email to himself. That email was never sent. The email is, false.
Melinda French Gates addressed the allegations for the first time on an NPR podcast.
Those questions are for those people and for even my ex-husband. They need to answer to those things, not me.
She says the flood of documents has filled her with unbelievable sadness.
For me, it's personally hard whenever those details come up, right? Because brings back memories of some very, very painful times in my marriage.
Bill Gates' relationship with the disgraced financier began in 2011, after Epstein was convicted of soliciting prostitution of a minor. Bill Gates says his interactions with the pedophile were limited to dinners, that he never visited Epstein Island, and that his focus was on funding for his charity, the Gates Foundation. Another rich and powerful individual embroiled in a scandal raising questions by the day. Touria Izri, Global News, Montreal.
Within the Epstein files is a draft of a statement from Ghislaine Maxwell that appears to confirm a photo of former Prince Andrew and Virginia Giuffre is real. Maxwell, a convicted sex offender and Epstein's former girlfriend, says she introduced the former prince to Giuffre, who was 17 at the time, and that the photo was taken at her London home in 2001. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has claimed the photo is fake and says he was out for pizza with his eldest daughter on the night in question. Andrew has denied any inappropriate contact with Giuffre, who died by suicide last year. British police confirm they are reviewing fresh allegations that Epstein provided Andrew with a woman to have sex with at his home on the grounds of Windsor Castle in 2010. And today, moving vans were seen in the driveway. Buckingham Palace has confirmed Andrew has moved out of his longtime home there. A ceasefire in name only ahead, what it's really like for people in Gaza. The so-called ceasefire in Gaza is not holding. Palestinians are still dying. The second phase technically started last month, but at least 20 Palestinians, including a number of children and a paramedic, have been killed in a new wave of Israeli strikes. And Gaza's health ministry says more than 530 people have been killed since the ceasefire was announced in October of last year. Vincent McAviney reports.
There's supposed to be a ceasefire. But in the past 24 hours, Israel has conducted deadly strikes against Palestinians in Gaza City and here in Khan Yunis. Tents shredded, possessions destroyed, bloodstains evidence of the suffering. The Israeli military says tanks and aircraft carried out precise strikes against what it called terrorists, who they say opened fire on troops in the north of the Strip, seriously wounding an officer. One of those killed, a Red Crescent medic who rushed to help victims of the initial strike. Hussein al-Samiri's colleagues carried his body through a crowd of mourners. These attacks must stop. International law provides protection to providers of health and ambulance services. Rami Abu Hameh's daughters, Rahaf and Rimas, were both killed in the airstrike. We moved to protect my children from the sea, the waves and the cold. They hit a tent next to me. What brought my child to this? Her head was gone. This girl is my beloved. In Gaza, more funerals. According to health officials here, Israel has killed more than 556 people in Gaza since the start of the ceasefire in October. Palestinian gunmen have killed 4 Israeli soldiers in the same period. Israel's airstrikes and the resistance of Hamas to disarm are impeding the peace plan process. There are some signs of progress, with the Rafah border crossing to Egypt reopening on Monday, allowing a limited number of Palestinians to leave for medical treatment and for some to return for emotional family reunions. The future of the Gaza they've returned to, though, is still deeply unclear. Vincent McAviney, Global News, London.
Almost 200 people have been killed in 2 separate attacks in remote villages in Nigeria. In the country's north, families gathered to bury their loved ones. At least 25 people were killed as armed men moved from home to home. And in the country's central state, armed attackers killed at least 170 people. It is the deadliest assault recorded in the area this year. Penny the Pincher, the Doberman Pinscher. Next, what's ahead for the Canadian winner of Best in Show.
God loves a terrier. Yes, he does. God loves a terrier.
That's Catherine O'Hara in one of her best-loved roles as owner of Winky the Terrier in the movie Best in Show. It lampooned the competitiveness and eccentricities of dog shows. O'Hara was honored Tuesday at the 150th Westminster Dog Show at Madison Square Gardens in New York City. It is one of the biggest dog shows in the world, and only one canine emerges as top dog. It wasn't a terrier this year, but as Heidi Petrachik reports, Penny the Doberman is Canadian.
Westminster went wild for 4-year-old Penny.
For Best in Show at the 150th Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show is the Doberman Pinscher.
The 42nd female for Best in Show and first Doberman since 1989.
It's the second time Penny's handler, Andy Linton, has shown a winning Doberman Pinscher after holding the leash for the last more than 3 decades ago. Penny beat out more than 2,500 canine competitors from more than a dozen countries, her Ontario-based breeders basking in the win.
It's surreal. It really is. I didn't even have any tears left to cry last night.
Other Canadian canines also placed best in class this year, including Kunik, the American Eskimo dog, and Capri, the Border Collie. But the last Canadian pooch crowned top dog at Westminster was British Columbian Beagle Miss P, more than a decade ago.
She just put on such a performance for the crowd. Who could not love Penny? When she free-stacked in the middle of that ring, you know, her and the handler were one. They were just so beautiful together.
Sherry George Richardson used to breed Dobermans and still shows her own. One of her dogs, a distant Penny relative.
Face sire is Penny's grandsire.
Small world. She hopes the spotlight on Penny also highlights the breed.
They're not a dog to be kept on the couch at home. You have to train them, socialize them, and they become a great friend and protector.
This is Chicken Out Penny.
The day after her big win, Penny was feted with a gourmet chicken dish chef prepared as she prepares for the next stage of her life.
Andy is going to be retiring himself, and she's going to come home. I'm going to get her certified as a St. John ambulance therapy dog because she is so lovable and so sweet.
Pretty Penny ending this chapter of her tale on an historic high. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
Look at those ears. Love them all. That is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Pratt Lake, Saskatchewan. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.